Ryan, are you able to see the chat?
I have the question and answer open, and
Yeah.
I can see the chat, but there is no one right now on the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi everybody. So we have people coming in from all over the world for this webinar now. I see it would be great if everyone you can introduce yourself on the chat and tell us where you're from. We'll just wait for a minute and then we'll get started. I already see some 30 people online and the numbers are climbing. Please do introduce yourself on the chat. As we start the webinar, you can either use the Q&A section or the chat to ask your questions. We'll try and get your questions to the speakers in short breaks that we'll take for the Q&As.
Welcome Lee, welcome Dr. Kaleem Islam, welcome Mal, welcome Samir, welcome Shirish, Chandani, Sarang. So good to see you all. Welcome Dr. Shampa.
All right, so let's get started. So welcome everyone. This is another series, another session from the Vowel Knowledge series. And in the last few sessions, we have been focusing on various aspects of making learning happen. And while we started this webinar series, I don't think it was planned to start with COVID. COVID just happened. And a lot of our sessions have been kind of trying to solve the problems that COVID has been throwing at how learning is happening across various industries. And today's session will try and focus more on the academic side of things, how are students learning amid the COVID pandemic. That's what we will have Dr. Ryan and Rahul talk about today. And we will, of course, start that in the webinar. I see we have attendees from all over the world. It's really great to see people join these knowledge series sessions. We at Vowel, while we are a software platform, one of the key reasons we started out with Vowel was that we wanted to create something that would help make learning happen in the real way, and not just create a software platform that would be for mandated learning to keep, ticking the boxes. This knowledge series is one of our ways to try and give back to the community, try and make it a platform for sharing ideas of how learning can happen. And of course, as we get into this situation right now that COVID has brought us into, we will try and unravel that puzzle. So let me give a quick introduction of what Vowel is for those who don't know about it. So Vowel LMS is a learning experience platform that me and Ajay co-founded a few years back. And we have been trying to solve this problem for various types of industries. So we have customers who are trainers, we have customers who are corporates, we have customers in academics. And across various industries, we have tried to create the software platform to give people the tools that online learning and learning in general throws at them. Of course, this session is not about Vowel. We will do specific webinars about the product. Today, we are going to be talking to Dr. Ryan and Rahul. And today's session will be focused on the academic side of things. So Ajay, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Parth. And thank you, Dr. Ryan and Rahul, for joining. It was great pleasure catching up with you a while ago. And to take cue from Parth, our motto is to make learning happen. And we don't just want to create products for the sake of features, but the motive is that we must gain some knowledge from experts like you, also from the audience, and see where the real problems are. So today's discussion is going to be focused on understanding what is changing for the education landscape, both for the corporate and mainly for the academic world. So coming to you, Rahul, let me begin with Rahul. And of course, Dr. Ryan, you can then share your thoughts. we are looking at online teaching and online learning in a manner that is unprecedented. What do you think has changed? I mean, is it really online learning or online teaching, or it's right now just pandemic teaching?
So that's a great question. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Rahul Kane. I have been here in the United States for the past 15 years. And my research background is in infectious disease and molecular biology, but mostly what I teach is microbiology, medical microbiology, anatomy and physiology. So science courses that are lab-based science courses online. Going back to your question, I think right now the synchronicity and asynchronicity is something that a lot of faculty are struggling with. So whether it is here in the US or in India, like I know from my friends about what is happening in the online teaching world in India, we suddenly had to move from a traditional model into a completely online model based on technology and teaching with technology. And that probably was, should be called, like you rightly said, pandemic teaching. That is not online teaching. That is not the best practices. People are trying to put together courses that work in this environment and for this time. But I hope that as we progress through it, people will change and make those a better or a higher quality online teaching. Ryan?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. And the major problem is that in many cases, we only had about a week to turn from a face-to-face setting to a completely online delivery method. And that has impacted the quality, of course, of the content. We had to sort of cut it down, trim it down to accommodate the time that it took us to get online. And also we needed to figure out a new way to deliver hands-on experiential learning. And so that was the major roadblock for us to go completely online. In some cases, we haven't been able to overcome that problem on how do we deliver experiential learning based on hands-on experience in a remote setting. Because oftentimes the presence of the instructor in the lab or in the learning environment is fundamental to correct small little things or to provide support to the students that is doing something for the first time and might be confused. So definitely, this is pandemic teaching. It's a patch that we had to put in there, and the quality is not equivalent to a good, well-thought online delivery course because, well, it's not.
Right. And what sort of a behavioral change would you look for in probably a student and also a professor? Because many of us are going online for the first time from a teaching standpoint. And there are things that you can do, there are things that you can't. So, and then of course, the attention, the eye contact, the professor has been the greatest motivator for the learners. And now the professor is far away from you and he's only seen on the screen. I'm not even sure. And the students may not even keep their video on, right? So what do you do? So what sort of a behavior is ideal from the professor standpoint and even from the student standpoint to make sure that this is a success?
You want to take that, Ryan?
Yeah, I can take these. So I want to latch back to what we were talking just a few seconds ago in our answer for synchronous versus asynchronous. Right. And so in my own daily practice as a teacher, what I decided to do in this pandemic emergency was to keep a synchronous delivery of the class. We had our lectures and our lab. So I decided to take those times just because, and I polled my students. I put a poll on my website and they told me that they wanted that daily routine kept because that was keeping them accountable. And so they were able to sort of having their normalcy, something that is still normal to them. They go to class and they see me, and that's reassuring. And they feel like, okay, I'm staying on track, because many of these students actually chose a face-to-face version because they didn't like, or they felt that an online version wasn't giving them enough accountability. And so what I decided to do is I'm doing the synchronous, recording the synchronous lecture, and then putting the recorded version on the website so that they can access that because this is an important thing, if they don't have, for instance, a reliable internet connection. In my group of students, I have several of them that they use their phone as their internet connection. And some of those phones are not as reliable as an actual internet connection to a computer or Wi-Fi or whatever. And so that's a major problem for them, accessibility. And oftentimes we forget that, well, if I have a good Wi-Fi, it's fine, but my students might not have it. Also, I had some colleagues that don't or didn't have a good computer, a new computer, or a Wi-Fi access that is easy and reliable. And so there is that part also on the teaching side that can hamper this sort of delivery. And that those were problems that we had to face, and impacts also how effective we can be in reaching out to our students. Rahul, do you want to add
Yeah,
something?
no, I agree completely with you. For me, the situation was slightly different. For past 4 years or so, I've been teaching completely online. And that was just to meet with the demand. We had a lot of student interest that wanted to take courses in online format. And some students just live so far away from physical universities that they just cannot come in, or they cannot afford to be on campus and live on campus and those expenses. So because a lot of courses that I was teaching were already online, I did not have to do much. But what I did end up doing was, with my experience that I have in online education, I was able to help other faculty put their courses online. And while putting their courses online, I realized all of these issues. Not all the courses can be taught completely asynchronously. Some courses need that synchronicity. In fact, I had one of my late start courses that I did make completely asynchronous, but I also took out all the deadlines from the course. So I just said, as long as you get everything done by the last day of the semester, I'll be fine with it. I'll just sit and grade your labs and your exams and we'll be okay. And that was a bad decision. I think students, like you said, Ryan, they like structure. They like to have a structure of some kind, whether or not it is an online or an asynchronous course or a synchronous course. I think putting in structures is really important. And Ajay, going back to your question, I think interactivity between students, it's the classical model of teaching online. You have to maintain that square, a faculty to student interaction, student to student interaction, student to material interaction, and material back to the faculty interaction. So that loop needs to be covered. And I think how you design your courses matters a lot. So gamification of courses or introducing more active or interactive things within the courses makes a huge difference as well. But the goal is, of course, to not have a student feel lost completely in an online world, but give them enough structure that they are tied to your course and invested and involved in your course as well.
Right. I mean, that brings me to my next question. And it's, again, for you both. What changes from the instructional design standpoint? What does anything change for Bloom's? Does anything change for Gagne's principle? Does anything change for successive approximation model, or does anything change for ADDIE? What would change there?
So what we have tried to do at my institution is we have the course mapping done. So with the course mapping, we know the goals that we have for a student when they are taking a specific course. What we want to make sure that the student learns from the course. But then we break it down. We use the Quality Matters model, or the Quality Matters national certification from, I think it's University of Missouri. Yeah. But what we are trying to do with that is to make sure that we have course level objectives, then we have specific objectives for the assignments and activities that the students are doing. And as long as the course and assignment level objectives are met, the institution is happy that the students are getting what they are paying for and what they should be getting for through that education. But from a bigger perspective, I think from an ID perspective, there are some established models for teaching online and good practices like the Quality Matters rubric. And those need to be customized for the student population and the instructor population of a specific school.
Yeah. Right. And I want just to add, and I'm seeing a question from Kalim Islam that is posing actually a good question. Isn't one challenge that all instructors aren't necessarily instructional designers? And that is actually a problem because not all of us as instructors are trained to seamlessly apply these concepts. You know, many people talk about Bloom's taxonomy, right? But they don't really grasp what that actually is and what it entails, right? And so, you know, adding a further layer that is shifting to an online delivery and having to learn all these pedagogical tools can pose a challenge for an institution and for the faculty of that institution, particularly if there is not the support from the institution directly to deliver that knowledge to the faculty, right? Or to support the faculty to implement what they should. So it's a teamwork between the faculty, the students, and the administration of the university. And sometimes they are not completely on the same page.
Right, and having an instructional designer, I think, is a luxury. A lot of universities do not have them. A lot of universities have one instructional designer for 300 faculty, which is not the right approach either. And you're very right, because as professors, we know our subject material. I know things about biology, but nobody taught me how to teach biology, right? We learned that from experience as teaching assistants or having good or bad professors and trying to imitate the good out of that. So instructional design as a science is a completely new or alien thing for a lot of professors. But then again, going back to my point where there are well-established rubrics, training programs, certifications. If somebody wants to learn more about it, those things are available. But again, like I said before, that might also be a luxury of time and a luxury of money for a lot of people to be able to avail those.
Right.
Yeah, and I believe also that there is a slight distinction between designing a course and delivering the course.
Oh, absolutely.
So there is a set of skills that an instructor has to have to be able to deliver the content of the class. But that doesn't mean that that instructor is also trained to design the class that he or she is going to deliver.
Right.
And that's an important thing.
I think Dr. Kalim is saying one more thing. So he's talking about Magar's 9 events. Are they similar to Garnier's 9 events? And can they be really more helpful for the professors?
So I have to confess, I have no idea what they are. Never heard about it.
Sorry.
Right. There's another question from Lee. Says a lot of schools are here struggling to grasp the concept, and they feel that the pandemic has forced them and then to implement an interim online learning solution. But some of the head teachers are hoping to revert back to the classroom-based format. So lack of strong internet connectivity is also a big factor. So is there a way in which we can change the way we embrace online and a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, or most asynchronous? Is there a way to help people where internet connection is a problem? And is there a way we can change something about it so that there can be help?
So, I think both Ryan and I are in a unique position to answer this question, because not only we are online, or not only that we are professors, but we are also trained in infectious diseases and understanding how infectious diseases spread. So the question is a great question about how to plan for the future, but we also need to keep in mind that they've been saying here in the US that the second wave is coming. I know Ryan has been tracking literally daily growth curve. So the predictability of a pandemic is what will influence the education as well. So even at my university or my college, we have decided to go part online and part in person for fall. But if in fall semester we have around November, if the second wave hits, we again have to go back to completely online. So going back to what you said, Ajay, I think we need to have as much flexibility in our teaching as possible, at least for the next fall semester and maybe another semester after that. And that flexibility could be the appropriate use of technology, appropriate use of the instructional design, the ability of the student to adapt to a change or a quick change into whatever we are trying to do. I think all of those would be really important factors.
Yeah, I agree with what Rahul just said. And I want just to add that probably for the next year or so, us as instructor will have to be very flexible in our delivery methods and flexible about our expectations from the students. And this is mainly because what I have observed from my own experience during this pandemic is that many of my students have other issues besides school that are impacting their life. Some of them have lost their job because, of course, everything is closed. Some of them were servers at the restaurants or public venues, and they don't have those jobs anymore. And so they had to find something else. And maybe that something else has a different time frame compared to what they had before. And so they cannot attend class. So it's not a matter of connectivity in that case, it's a matter of time availability. And they don't come to me and they don't tell me that. It's just that what I see is they disappear from a roster. They might drop because they feel that they cannot keep on going. And then it's my duty as an instructor to figure out a way to reach out and make that available. Because, well, that's my goal, for them to learn and be in a position to learn. And to do that, they need to have a job, they need to have the ability to access that, they need to be able to pay their bills. Some of them, they cannot pay their rent, right? They don't have a home. Some of them had to go back to their parents and they're in the basement.
Absolutely.
There are so many other factors around framing this discussion that oftentimes we forget, but they are important.
Right. So Dr. Samir here says that they use external companies to help them design courses and internal center of excellence in teaching and learning staff to develop the courses. So is there something like that we can sort of embrace? How much of it can be actually converted into e-learning courses? So out of all the things that you teach at the college, at the university, how much of it can be actually transformed into e-learning course that people can take them in a self-paced manner? So of course you cannot really take the professor away, but if there are challenges with the internet connection, there are challenges with the technology, and there's probably not a great unified solution around, do you think if you could convert some of your teaching into an e-learning course that people can take from an offline mobile app or something, will that kind of thing help?
So there's multiple questions built within that question, right? So I'm reading Samir's question here. It's more specifically about science labs. So let's talk about that first, and then we'll talk about can an entire course be taken offline. So here in the US, and specifically in the state that Ryan and I are in, our state faculty contract gives us a lot of ability to design the course the way we want to design it. And they call that the academic freedom. So my academic freedom allows me to decide what form and how I want to design the course. And they trust the faculty to do the best for their students. So with that, and with the demand and the need for online courses, what we've been able to do is to put some science courses online. And of course, we use the publisher or external companies give us the lab kits. And the lab kits have some of the experiments. I've got I've got a skeleton right here that my students use. It's like a 2-foot tall skeleton, but does it do the right job of having an actual human skeleton? No, it does not. But also, on the other hand, Mayo Clinic is here in Minnesota, which is one of the topmost healthcare institution in the world. And Mayo Clinic has courses, master's level courses that use complete simulations. So students never get to see an actual skeleton. They learn on simulations of a skeleton before they do a small practicum in which they are exposed to the real things. So it is up to the comfort level of the faculty of the institution and of the students as well as to what they can and cannot do. So for the science labs, my students get a sheep heart that they dissect at home. They get a sheep kidney, sheep brain. All these things are vacuum sealed and shipped off to their homes, and they're able to use them. But by using those and online simulations that go along, they are able to learn the things that my students would otherwise use or learn in an actual physical lab. The only difference that I see between the two is that when these things are happening in an actual lab setting, I am there. My students have their friends there or their coworkers or classmates there. So they're learning from each other at the same time as well. But when you ship these things off to somebody's home, they're doing it on their kitchen counter. And that may not be the same level of learning experience as it is in an actual classroom setting. And then to the second part of your question, can things be taken completely offline? I mean, we had that, right? We had correspondence courses. They were back in India or here as well, where you get an envelope with everything shipped off to you and you fill those things out and send it back. There's no plagiarism checker. There's no making sure that you are the person who is writing the answers and you're not having your uncle write the answers for you, for example. So that is the taking things completely offline. And I think some schools have gone back to that model as well. Some universities have gone back to that model. But I think it definitely depends on what you are trying to teach and the subject material and matter as well.
So, sorry, just to interject a second, but that's also the stigma that comes with those fully online universities or programs, right? And we are having the same debate in our own institutions where, well, I'm putting this program completely online, but there is that stigma, that sort of feeling that a completely online delivery is subprime, is less good than a face-to-face, particularly in science. And so in some cases it's true, the online could be done better. In other cases, the online delivery is as effective as face-to-face and sometimes even more. So it's sort of like a far west out there of this online delivery where you have everything under the sun, top quality classes and very poor ones. And for a student to choose between those, it's really, really difficult.
Right. We have one interesting question, and that's a little going away from this topic, but so how do you limit the amount of distractions students have and keep them sort of motivated, and especially within this synchronous learning? So how do you do that? I mean, how long can you actually look at the screen? How long can you engage? How long can you just sit tight and not look at your phone, not look at the doorbell, not, whatever? So how do you take care of that?
I can tell you that I have sometimes, right now I'm in my summer session semester, right? And so I have a pretty packed set of lectures and I'm delivering them, as I was saying, synchronously, recording them and putting them online. So my lectures are about 2-hour sessions. And I can tell you that it's difficult for me to keep my attention focused for all that amount of time. And I'm sure that my students are not keeping focus on that. Hence the necessity to put the recorded version, because they will lose me through that long lecture. And so they will need to be able to go back and take a look at that. I cannot ensure that they keep engaged the entire lecture because I don't see them. like in this Zoom meeting, I don't see you guys that are present there, and I don't have any feedback on what I'm saying. You know, every time that we are lecturing, we have slightly little signs that our students are engaged, like nodding. If they're looking at their phone, we know, or they're doing something and giggling, we know that they're not paying attention. We don't have that feedback. So that's the major limitation that we have in this sort of delivery. And we need to trust our students that then after the synchronous version of our class, they will go back and use our recording to go asynchronously and get that information. There is very little that we can do. And I don't have a real method to ensure that. And I don't think it would be completely fair either, because as I said, I'm the first one that every now and then is like, oh, there was the door ringing. Oh, the dog is barking. Oh, squirrel out there. I mean, that's how it goes, right?
The only thing I'd like to add to that, Ryan, is I've seen all these gimmicks that people are doing online now in the online teaching community. And I shouldn't call them gimmicks. I mean, some of them work, but every 15 minutes or so, they play a small game to make sure that everyone is paying attention. So it's not, and this is not gamification of teaching. It's simple thing like, okay, I'm going to touch my nose. Everyone has to touch their nose. So that way we know that everyone is paying attention on the screen. Like when you do simulcast to class. And some professor friends of mine have been doing those kind of things to make sure everyone is paying attention every 10 or 15 minutes or so. But like you said, it's impractical to think that people will be able to pay attention over a span. You know, like in classroom, I've taught lectures that have gone for an hour and a half. I cannot expect a half an hour lecture to go online, you know? So keeping the lectures shorter, recording them, publishing them later for students to consume afterward. And I think just lowering the expectations of students paying attention during a live online course, knowing all the distractions that they have around them.
Yeah, and I actually believe that many students don't really want to show their homes. They don't want to show where they are living. And so they won't accept being on a Zoom meeting, for instance, where we can tell them, oh, touch your nose. No, because they don't want to be seen.
The camera is off, right.
And so, and even with the background, they don't want to be seen because they're not going to dress up or get ready for the class.
Right. So we have some people join from the corporate sector as well. So we have Mr. Raj Dubey asking, so he's suggesting maybe shorter spells of lectures and then some practice sessions and then another module and so on to keep the distraction away. So how do you, although I know you may or may not want to take this question, but even from a corporate learning standpoint or a training standpoint and university education standpoint, what is the ideal time frame that one could look at for synchronous versus asynchronous? Looking at the attention span of people, students, as well as corporate learners, what do you suggest we could do to make sure that this is a success?
I believe that once I took this class actually on teaching effectiveness. And I think that there are studies out there that they say that after the first 20, 30 minutes, you only retain just 30% of whatever is said. And after those first 20, 30 minutes, it's gone. There is no attention left. So the only way that I was taught during this class to keep your students engaged is changing the pace, changing tone of voices, all those little gimmicks that we are trained to do as instructors, right? Or putting like, oh, let's do this activity all together so that you wake up and we are doing something. Online is more difficult because we don't have the interaction between the students. We cannot make groups. Well, we could create, small groups and little rooms where they can work together, but how can you ensure that they will actually stay engaged? Instead, they won't just turn off the video and do something else, right? So that's a limitation that we have. And I'm not sure that, so to go back to the question, maybe shorter spells of lectures and some practice, we know that they do work, but and we do implement them, but there are some constraints to that delivery also. And,
right. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we complete our curriculum. And
Exactly.
sometimes the curriculum needs that the lectures have to be a certain length.
Yeah.
But the way that you are doing, Ryan, and the way I do is even if my lecture is about an hour long, and if I send them the video, they can watch it in 15-minute increments and take breaks and then continue from there on. Because the curriculum has to be completed. And for corporate, I think making smaller videos might work because there's no hard and fast rule as to what the entirety of the curriculum is there.
So I had a colleague that actually had a good idea for a hybrid kind of class where he has face-to-face. One day, he has, I believe, two lectures per week, a little bit longer. Excuse me. And what he does is one is face-to-face and the other one instead has a set of topics that are covered by separate, distinct videos that he recorded with his face, him narrating it with a background and all of that shebang, and showing that. And so one is face-to-face and the other one is actually online delivered. And it has been very effective for both the students that require more accountability and for students that actually prefer to have more flexibility on their time and what they dedicate, because at this time they only have one day a week where they do have to be there. So that's also a possibility, which is not applicable right now with the pandemic, but future.
So what is the longest duration of the lecture that you had online, Rahul, especially you, and then Dr. Ryan as well?
So I think most my online lectures average out between 45 minutes to an hour. But in a traditional setting, like I think I was looking at my curriculum last summer, I taught a microbiology course where I taught a 3-hour lecture, followed by a 4-hour lab, followed by another 3-hour lecture for a different section. So for me, it was a 10-hour day, 3 times a week, which was exhausting, but it is impractical to have that squeezed in within 6-week microbiology course, which we teach over 18 weeks or 16 weeks usually. So we've had to compromise there, but for online, usually I keep it between 45 minutes to an hour.
Right. And so there's an interesting question around, so maybe Dr. Ryan, you could tell me about your experience, and then I'm going to ask you one more interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Oh, about this? Well, my experience, so I have face-to-face classes that can last 2 hours each, labs mainly, and they're back-to-back. So I have one day where I have almost 8-hour continuous back-to-back labs. And that's challenging, of course, for my attention and my sanity more than for the students. Online, these are the longest classes that I had so far because we are in the summer semester and we have only 5 weeks to cover the entire content. And so I have 2 hours lecture followed an hour, 2 hours break, and then I have 2 hours lab delivered online as well.
So yeah, so one question from Mr. Pawan says, can you share some techniques and tricks to keep students engaged? Especially when it goes beyond 20 minutes. Yeah, when it goes beyond 20 minutes.
Yeah, students like points, or marks. So if you give a quiz every 20 minutes, I think they'll pay attention.
Okay.
They'll be forced to pay attention. It's not the optimal thing to do, but if that's what you need to do, then give them a 10-point quiz every 20 minutes on the content that you've covered.
Right.
I break it with videos. So I just say, all right, now, and I try to change a little bit the pace just to, it's more difficult to get, usually when I'm face-to-face, I get feedback from them. I ask them questions, but in this case, with this sort of delivery, it's difficult to ask questions. People don't like to be singled out. Usually, and they would feel singled out if I were to say, you, Rahul, so what do you think about this? What is your take?
Would stop my Zoom and walk away.
Exactly. And they have the power to shut me up. So, you know, again, those are gimmicks. Giving away extra credit points, they always work. Again, they can still say, I don't care about the extra credit. Bye, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And how do you do your lab sessions? This question is for both of you. How do you do your online lab sessions? Some people, Sarang would like to know about it from the audience.
So in my case, it needed a lot of creativity, because I'm a firm believer that the lab, like microbiology, does require hands-on practice. And there are certain skills that you need, manual skills, that you need to learn under supervision of someone that knows how to do that. The simplest thing is to inoculate a tube, where you need to use your pinky, you need to use the Bunsen flame or an incinerator, and do all these things with proper aseptic techniques, right? Those are things that I need to watch and follow, and I cannot do that. So that took some creativity. What I'm trying to do is giving them the source of information to see how it's properly done. I'm there when we are watching YouTube video, and I point out on how techniques are done, and I point out, oh, look at that, how they are doing it. Pay attention to these things. Are they going to retain that? And is it going to be the same as if they were doing it manually and actively in a lab? Probably not. But I'm trying to give them the sources so that next year, when they will be in the med micro lab, they might say, yeah, I saw that. Let's pay more attention to this part, because. So it took a lot of change.
In my case, I teach microbiology, but I also teach anatomy and physiology. For that, what I have done is I've made a 15-minute video that goes over the entire lab, and I basically do the lab for them, like the main things in the lab or important concepts of the lab. Then they go and do their own thing. And the publisher has provided some animations that walk them through those as well. And then you go in the second half of it, where students are evaluated on the skills that they have learned. So the evaluation is not about theory or material, it is about skill-based evaluation. So that's how I've been able to do it for a few years now.
Right. So audience, there is a poll here that is online now. It'll be great if you could, give your answers and submit those. They're mainly around the discussion that we're having right now. So while that happens, let me ask this question to both of you again. So when you talk about asynchronous and you create, let's say, an online lab experience, so with the help of VR or AR, also with the help of simulations, how far can you actually go in terms of making sure that the learning has happened? Vis-a-vis a usual day, I am in the lab, I have Dr. Fink or Rahul in front of me, and I'm using all the equipment, all the apparatus in front of them in the right manner, smelling, feeling, touching. So how far can we go, and how effective is really this?
Like Ryan was saying, it is all skill-based stuff. So a simple act of taking bacteria from one plate and putting it on a different plate, you have to have the tactile sense of not breaking the agar, like putting it just on the surface of it. So that's pressure sensitivity that your hand learns over a period of time. Or when you're dissecting open a specimen, not cutting in too deep, but saying peripheral. Like smells, you mentioned for organic chemistry or chemistry labs, smells are important. So these things are, the extent of VR and AR is still limited to these things. And we also have to be mindful of budget. Not every student will be able to afford things. Like Google has the Google eyeglasses now, the VR glasses, and those are, I think, $8. But $8 may be a lot of money for a student for a device that can or cannot work or may not work. So it depends on the budget and what is available and what can be created specifically for teaching sciences. But I have faculty friends who teach art history who are using VR phenomenally. They're giving tours of world famous museums using VR, and that works for them. I have other faculty friends who teach geology and geography, so they're able to take students on virtual tours, and those work great as well. So it may work for certain areas, but not for all the areas of that we are trying to teach.
Yeah,
Right?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
So in ILT, we use visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, right? So how do you do it when it's online? What happens to visual is still fine. What happens to auditory, and what happens to kinesthetic?
Well, but that's the point that Rahul was saying,
yeah.
right? When you are plating something on a plate, when you are streaking something on a plate, the feeling, the feedback, the tactile feedback that you get from there is part of the experience, it's part of the learning process, right? Sure, I can show you. How many of us have followed, you know, a YouTube video on how to make a dish, right? Prepare something. And then your final result looks like nothing you were seeing there, right? It's a mess. Why? Because you are lacking that feeling was like, oh, I'm whipping up these eggs too much, or I'm stirring this thing for too long. Science in the end is following a recipe, and all the little things, little tricks that you put when you're doing that recipe. And so those are things that are very difficult to deliver in an online format. And
so the question is, how are you doing it now, more than anything else? So how are you addressing it right now, the same problems?
Well, describing what is the sensation, describing what is the little trick that I'm deploying there, describing the fact that be careful there. The same thing that they do when they deliver a recipe through a YouTube video. They will tell you if they're good at delivering it, they will tell you, oh, mind that if you are leaving this too long on the stove, it will burn, or it will give you a weird taste, right? All those little things. But clearly it's more challenging than just showing it, because showing it is the most immediate way to do, and then observing, oh, you're not doing it right, and you correct that right away, it's very effective. And so until we have a seamless VR experience, virtual reality experience, where with all these senses coming together, we're not going to be able to have the same experiential experience that you could have in a face-to-face lab. We are not. And we need to be aware of that. If that's the direction we want to go, we need to be aware of that. And that's a layer of instructions that we need to add if we want to deliver it.
So, you know, what I want to add to what Ryan said is, what Ryan talked about is about instruction and about the teaching aspect of it. But the second part of our job is assessment, whether or not the student understands what we want to be conveyed to them. And you guys mentioned Bloom's earlier. You know, Bloom's talks about the specific verbiage to be used. Was this achieved? How do you define something, a skill being achieved? A skill is achieved when a student is able to perform it independently by themselves. But 80% is also passing grade, and 85% is also passing grade, and 95% is also passing grade, and 100% is also passing grade. So if the student is able to somewhat proficiently achieve it, between that range of 80 and 100%, they have still achieved that. It is not ideal, like Ryan explained, it is not, but good teachers will always explain to them what are those small things that we want to make sure that they understand and get. I think you're mute. Yeah.
So I have one more question for Rahul, Dr. Ryan, and also to Parth, who's my co-founder here. Is there any solution that you've come across, any unified experience that you've come across where you can actually blend in the entire synchronous, asynchronous, virtual, and real together? So is there a way in which we can do that? Of course, never to 100%, but at least to 75%, 80%.
I mean, it's
So
dependent on so many different things. Sorry, Ryan. It's depending on your class size, what you're teaching, what your budget is, what the abilities or capabilities of your students are. And this will have a different answer for the teaching and learning environment in a smaller country versus a bigger country, a smaller college versus a bigger university, high school, K-12. I saw a question about kindergarteners. So it's going to be very dynamic. And that dynamism is, I think, what will lead to more innovation. Right now, there are some opportunities, but if there are no constraints of budget and the other constraints that I mentioned, then yes, including all of these into one setup would be a great idea. Speaking of educational technologies, I think Parth and I had talked about the H5P before, and I looked at the assessments that H5P is able to create, which includes a 360 tour of things and gamification and questions of different kinds. So going back to assessment, I think that's a great assessment tool for an online environment where you can incorporate a lot of things using multiple parts of that technology, which is open source, can be put in and built in and creating. But at the end of the day, all of this gets back to good teaching and good teaching practices. And that's something that needs to be, I mean, see, I was in a meeting the other day and somebody used this really good phrase, which I would like to use here as well. Technology should not precede pedagogy. It is all about pedagogy. And you should keep pedagogy in mind and use technology as tools for implementing that pedagogy.
Well, I want just to add one thing, and I agree with everything that you, Rahul, have just said. We need to also remember that the future for these students is going to be this, what we are doing right now. So they need to be aware that most likely they will not take a plane, come to the United States, or vice versa, from the United States, coming over there and be face-to-face interacting with people. So they need to start learning that all these tools to be able to communicate in this different format without forgetting the individual, the interaction between people and how to work in face-to-face team, because that's part of those things that we like to call soft skills and that our students oftentimes are lacking. So that's a component of what they are learning. And so a mixed delivery, a hybrid delivery of all these different techniques, I think would be the best way to teach a course. Now, again, infrastructure is important. Amount of money that is available for a class is important. However, for instance, microbiology is a relatively expensive class from the lab standpoint. And so maybe figuring out a way to integrate more some parts of that. We know that some skills, manual skills, are important, but we know that some others, and so they must be delivered face-to-face, but some others can be delivered in a remote way. So maybe we need to take a look also on how we deliver all the contents in our lab and think about, okay, we can sort of integrate all of these approaches, and that might be useful pedagogically also to teach other softer skills.
Over to you, Parth.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting perspective, and I think blended and kind of a combination is the way to go. But there will be some things that we will always miss. There is technology missing to fill those pieces, like right now, like the sense of taste or the sense of smell, or the feedback that you get while making a dissection, for example, that Rahul was talking about. So while some of those things are missing, a lot of the things are also getting into the place. So and it's very interesting. I mean, I was talking to one of our prospective customers the other day who are doing an entrepreneurship class, which they used to teach completely offline. And this is for really the courses for the masses, like, how to be a hairdresser or how to be a beautician. And these were classes that they were taking completely offline. And now they are switching to online. And they are taking these classes on Zoom, and they're getting some really good feedback there. And now they're looking at doing like a blended model where they'll probably take a workshop, which is maybe a 3-day workshop, which will take place in person. But everything else is going to be a series of videos that are pre-recorded, a few live sessions, and very few. I mean, what used to be 100% in-class course now is going to be hardly 5%, which is the physical workshop. And that is evolving and working to a degree. Of course, the practice part of it, where you kind of, especially in skills like you being a beautician or a hairdresser, a lot of it is also real time on the job learning, right? Where after you take the course, you actually go and do an apprenticeship somewhere. And that apprenticeship part is going to be hard to replace. But you being able to do a lot of this, at least trying to reduce the physical part, is definitely something that, especially the current situation, very unconventional places where we would not think where e-learning or virtual learning would have reached at all, is reaching. So definitely, I think some parts of the physical aspect of teaching are not really replaceable yet. We don't have the technology to do that yet, but a lot of it is possible. And like Rahul said, it's also the budgetary aspect, right? For example, some kinesthetic feedback you could get even in a virtual scenario, but would you have the hardware to do that? Not everywhere, right? So I would say that anywhere between 70 to 90% we could replace, depending on what kind of content is being taught. In some cases, you might not need any physical aspect at all. But yes, a combination is the way to go. And I think that it does come down to using the technology as a tool set. That if I'm a teacher in a constrained situation right now where I have to teach online, am I using everything that is available to me to make sure that I make the best of that situation, whatever those tools are? And there is a lot of tools out there which are open source, which are available even as cloud services, which can be done. I think it's about educating the teachers as well. And maybe like someone said on the chat, that teachers are not taught to teach online. Maybe that is going to be a big thing to do now, as to how do we help them get engaged with these tools, because maybe historically they have been something that technology wasn't, they were not that friendly to technology. I mean, now they are being put into this situation where they have to use it. But if we can help them teach online, and if that could be a problem to solve, then I think it's just about opening their eyes to everything that's out there, right?
So Parth, my question, a little more to that question, is that what is your vision of an ideal unified solution to do all this together? What that solution should do?
So I would say that a unified solution should give this Swiss Army knife of tools to a teacher, where they can decide what kind of a session, how do they want to take it. So if I feel like recording a video and putting it up, or if I want to do it live, or if I want to just drag and drop a ready lab 360, 3D virtual lab into the mixture, I should have that plethora of pieces ready for me. So whatever the type of content, whether it's a YouTube video that's helping me teach it, or it's an open source lab that maybe Google has created that I can just drag and drop into my mix, or a live lecture I want to take, I think that I should have the freedom to do that. And I think things are going there. There are a lot of tools out there. The integration maybe doesn't exist to that degree right now, where I can just pull and uh, drag and drop things into the box. But I think, I mean, we are trying some of these things in Marvel, as you know. Not everything is in place yet, but I think generally there is a lot of innovation happening. It's not integrated yet, but in the years to come, I think we'll see a lot of these things happening like this.
Great. So I think we are already running out of time. It's just 1 minute to go. So let me thank Rahul and Dr. Ryan on behalf of all of us at Wowell, and also on behalf of the audience. I also thank the audience for participative approach that they've shown. They've asked some really great questions. We've got some wonderful interactions within the audience as well. And that has also prompted us to think as to what all can be done, the possibilities especially. And so one last question is, what would you suggest to people who've never done any teaching online to do? And what are those skills that they need to hone or acquire so that they become good online teachers? And this question is for you both, Rahul and Dr.
Ryan. Two quick things, I think. One is find a mentor who is already teaching online and ask for help. As educators, we all always like to help. I actually have another Zoom meeting right after this where I'm helping someone else from my university to teach online. So we are always happy to help. And I just want to extend that to everyone on the chat. I know we have like 37 people right now participating, but I'm more than available to answer any questions, and please feel free to give them my email after this as well. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is be empathetic. Ryan and I, we both have talked about what we feel about our students. And I think just having the empathy and understanding things from the student's perspective and creating your online courses. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. It's not about technology, it is more about pedagogy. So understanding the people that you are serving or helping, your students, and then using technology and putting it to the best use is what is more important. Right?
Yeah, and I agree, of course, with the fact that empathy is extremely important in this sort of delivery. You don't have the feedback from the students that you would have in a face-to-face, so it's more difficult to read how they are doing and what they are thinking. So you need to be extra careful for that. You shouldn't be afraid of reaching out and asking them, guys, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Because that's a part of that human touch that we all need. When you are preparing for your online transition or for your online class, be creative. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, because you will make mistakes. Something will work perfectly. Other things will be really bad. Some things that you have seen someone else, or maybe your mentor is saying, oh, this really works. Then you do it and it really doesn't work for you because you are not that person. You know, some people have sparkly personalities and they are entertainers. Others are a little bit more withdrawn and they have a different teaching style. And so not everything will work for you, for your class, and for your students. And you will discover that only if you do it. If you don't do anything, you won't make any mistake, but you won't go anywhere. If you do something, you might make a mistake, and well, you will fix it.
And one last question I still have to squeeze in, because that's interesting. I want to see what's your take on it. How do you make sure that the kindergarten students are engaged? And it's a question from the audience. And I want to know, as biology professors of higher education, what are your thoughts?
I don't think that tying them down is a possibility. Tying them to the chair. Oh my goodness, that's Rahul, you go ahead.
Oh God, no. So I have friends who teach in kindergarten level. I have friends who teach at high school level here in the US as well. And I always tell them that they have immense amount of patience. And just because I have none of that, that's why I teach university and college level students, right? But it is very hard. It is, but the quick reflection that I have is the things that I remember from my kindergarten days are the things that gave me joy, gave me happiness, and made me learn something new or exciting. So as long as your kindergartners are gaining joy, happiness, and are learning something new, I think they will be invested in that.
Actually, I do agree. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I'd like to take a stab at that. I mean, maybe not an ideal situation, Janni, but with kindergarten kids, I think the best way to do it is get their parents engaged into the situation as well, where the typical props that you would use in an actual kindergarten, if they are available with the parent, and you're effectively teaching the parent how to teach the kid, and do it as a co-session, that might be the closest you could get to it. Because even if the kid isn't engaged, they would be engaged with their parent. And that could be one way to solve that. I mean, it's a very hard question, like Rahul said, but I think this could be something that could work. Ryan, please continue.
And as I was saying, I totally agree with Rahul and what you just said. Probably engaging the parents is important, and maybe making it less a duty or a task that they have to complete, but more like on the gaming side, making it like you're doing something for the fun of it. And that hopefully would train these younger students into enjoying learning, because that's in the end the most important skill that we are teaching them at that age. That is, learning can be fun, can be useful. It opens your mind and it gives you access to the world. And so giving that perspective little by little by making it fun. But these are things that we already know. Is the delivery part of that is difficult, you know.
Right. So Parth, over to you for the parting note.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think thank you, Rahul, and thank you, Dr. Ryan, for a fantastic session. This was really, really one of the most engaging sessions I've seen in a while. And to all the audience who's still there, really thank you for all your questions. I think the chat was really flying with the questions. So this was a really, really interesting session. And I think we have got some good feedback on what kind of webinars people would like to see. I have seen that, and maybe Rahul and Ryan, you could help us with this. People want you to teach them to teach online. And that's something that a lot of people want from this. So these are things that I think will be required. And at Wobble, we'll try and do what we can to help make more sessions like this happen. What I would like to, on a parting note, do is, obviously, I mean, this was really one of the more engaging webinars, like I said. So once again, really thank you to the speakers and the audience. For staying tuned to what's coming next, I would just ask you to sign up to our newsletter. You can see the link on our screen. Either you can find it on our website, that is wobblelms.com, or you can go to bit.ly/make-learning-happen and subscribe to our newsletter, where we'll keep you posted on the next webinar. Thank you for participating in our polls. We have your feedback and we'll try to make sure that we do more sessions that interest you. Thank you so much. Thank you for a wonderful evening and morning for some of you. And till next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all of you. Thanks, Parth. Thanks, audience. Goodbye for now.
All right.